All right, well, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call the February 11th, 2021 Airport Advisory Board meeting to order. Nice to see everyone this evening. As we're all more than well aware, meetings are all being held remotely right now. If you'd like to watch the if you'd like to watch the meeting live stream, click play on the video link, then the interactive agenda window, which are on the city's agenda management portal. Can we please start with the roll call? Michelle, could you please call the roll?
Yes. I have board members Steve Bliss,
Here.
Malcolm Dean,
I'm here.
Harrison Earl,
Here.
Kent Jacobson,
Here.
Melinda Jordan,
Here.
Russell Robeson,
Here.
Orion Wiseman, and Councilmember Peck. You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Anyone who's wishing to provide public comment this evening must be watching the live stream of the meeting and call in when we're going to open the meeting for public comment. That is the next agenda item, so I'm just going to move straight there. The call-in number is 888-788-0099. You'll enter that meeting ID, and then when asked for your participant ID, please press pound. You'll need to live stream and listen for instructions on the phone. Once you hear confirmation and you've entered the meeting, we will be placed in a virtual meeting room and admitted, and you'll be called upon by the last 3 digits of your phone number to provide comments. So please, if you'd like to have a comment, call in now. Dial that number, that's 888-788-0099. Meeting ID is 824-3120-3618, and then press pound for the participant ID. We're going to take that 5-minute break to give folks the opportunity to get dialed in this evening. And so we will just stand by for a couple minutes. If anyone does want to call in and comment, now is your chance. We'll give it about 2 more minutes to give anyone an opportunity to dial in. Again, phone numbers on the screen, 888-788-0099. Meeting ID is 824-3120-3618, and then press pound when prompted for the participant ID. About 2 minutes and we'll move on to the next topic if no one calls in.
Chair, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. We'll give it about 30 more seconds for the slide to clear, and then I'll let you know when we can go.
Perfect, thank you. Welcome, Councilmember Peck. Notice you joined us.
There you go. Thank you. Yes, I'm sorry I'm late, but the passcode wouldn't work after the 5th try. I got in.
No problem.
It's showing that it's loading. Give me one moment.
No problem.
So it doesn't look like we need to do one thing to kind of wake up this live stream. So give us just a minute.
We will hang out and wait.
And we're back online.
All right, thanks. So we can go ahead.
Yes.
Wonderful, thank you. So we will move on then to topic 4 on the agenda, which is approval of the minutes of the last meeting. I know that Melinda, you have a couple changes. Does anyone else have changes, or Melinda, would you like to maybe make a motion? Melinda, you're on mute, unfortunately.
I didn't plug in all my screens here. I move that we approve the minutes with just a couple minor edits. On page 1, line 15, it's members plural, and it should just be member for Orion. Page 3, line 37, just a typo on a number, 78,000, I think it should be, and it's just missing a 0. And then on page 4, line 7, Malcolm belongs to the EAA, not EA. It's just some tiny ones, but probably jumped out to some other people. And that was all I saw. And they, like, again, they were minor. So I move that we approve with those minor adjustments, edits to the permanent record.
Is there a second? Thank you. That was Russell, right?
Yep.
Any discussion, further edits from anybody? And all those in favor of the motion to approve the minutes as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed, say nay. All right. Moving on then to old business. First up is the financial update, standing item. Mr. Slater, the floor is yours.
Here, the total revenue received to date for 2021 through the end of January is $84,555.92. Total expended or encumbered is there's $20,335.02 with $222.78 for a total revenue versus expended of $63,998.12 to the good. And then professional contract services, we have those broken out with only 3 items so far charged to that account. And that's all I had.
Any questions from the board? Mr. Robeson?
Thank you, Chairman. David, if I remember correctly, the line under expenses that reads administration management service is the money that goes back to the city. Is that right?
That's correct.
So I remember a few years ago, you convinced him to take about half or less, as I recall. And now it looks like it's gone back up around 41% or so. Is that right?
Well, it depends on what all was done in that particular year. So the way that works is we are being charged for 2 years prior. So for 2021, that would be 2019. And of course, there were more things going on during 2019, particularly with legal assistance and things like that. So we have a higher charge, and that is still at 50% of what it would have been if the city was collecting 100% of that fee, then it would be double that.
Okay. I guess, is there a formula or where does the number come from exactly?
So each department or any department that has any items that go to council or human resources, accounting, legal, city manager's office, city clerk's office, any department that does anything with the airport charges for the time they spend on whatever they're dealing with for the airport. So there's a fee based off of that person's salary, and a percentage of the supervisor of that person is also charged, as well as the office space that they use.
Okay. So the number for the year 2023 will be known to you at the end of this year, but it won't be charged for 2 years into the future. Is that right?
So,
Or is it?
Correct. In 2023, we will be charged whatever time those different departments spent on airport-related items.
But you'll know at the end of this year or early next year what the number will be in 2023 for budget purposes?
Not without having them go in and do research and pull a report on what is being submitted. And I don't know if they do that the year of or collect that data the year before they charge it. So they have to get each department that's charging for that submits it through finance and accounting. It's kind of from my understanding and in my opinion, somewhat convoluted for trying to figure out who is charged what. But I would have to go through accounting and ask them if they can pull a report and find out what we're going to be charged in 2 years. But I can do that. I can make that request if that's what you're looking for.
Well, I mean, the basic thing I was looking for is why did it increase 41%? But now that I understand it's 2 years in arrears, and I recall the legal issues we had, so that makes sense. But it does seem convoluted to me as well.
Mm-hmm. And you being a one-man office to have that much of an administrative burden, but if you take legal and all those other things into account, yeah. But it does seem like a lot for considering you work pretty much on your own. And
well, keeping in mind also that if I had my own staff, which would be HR and accounting and all of those things, I would have to pay all those employees' salaries and benefits full time, not just for the time that they're working on airport issues.
Mhm.
And of course, if we had to hire outside legal counsel, I'm sure we would be charged quite a bit more than what the city attorney's office.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a jump though, for sure.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Mr. Jacobson, did you have a comment that you were looking for as well? And you were on mute, sorry. Kent, you need to unmute yourself.
Here we are. Is that
There you
better?
go. Yep.
Interest, operating income, zero budget, 8,800 in for the month. Is that a typo, or might you expect more income during the year? And what's it for? It wasn't budgeted.
No, it's never budgeted because it's difficult for them to project that kind of number. So it's never budgeted. It's just always whatever
Whatever it is.
get off of the operating interest based off of how much is in the account. And of course that changes month to month. So as it changes, then I make that adjustment and report what it is for that month.
Okay. The only other question I have, there are about 6 items, 2 under income and 4 under expense, that show zeros all the way across. Are they really necessary to keep them unless you're anticipating a line item in there? Why include them?
So under miscellaneous, there was miscellaneous revenue that came in 2019. So I'll leave that line item in. So you can see what it was the previous years. The special event and space rental, we had in there because originally for 2020 or 2019, 2020, I think, we were thinking there might be an air show, but with COVID, that wasn't possible. So we just basically removed that from the budget and didn't receive anything for the expo and didn't expend anything for the expo. So that's why that's in there. Again, in a given year, I could take it out, but for a year that it goes back in and any 2 years prior that we show it on the list, we keep it in there.
Yeah, I'm just suggesting that as long as there are anticipations like that, I think it's fine. But
Right.
I just recommend looking over the list in due course. And
Sure.
if it isn't likely that there will be an expenditure, maybe by next month you can drop 1 or 2. So
Sure.
Other questions from board members on the financial update? Mr. Slater, I have one, and that's the repair and maintenance line, which at least on a budget is substantially higher than what the actual has been in the last couple of years.
Yes. So this year we have a taxiway, an asphalt taxiway that runs basically on the west end of the ramp. It runs north towards the executive hangars. And that asphalt has been patch repaired since before I arrived in 2015. And it is at the end of its useful life. And so we have an on-call contractor that's able to do a 2-inch mill and overlay. And we're going to be spending approximately $48,000 to $50,000 on that project. And then we have a water quality pond, detention pond, that as I've handed off kind of the stormwater management plan and things like that to the environmental department, I'm still in charge of it. I'm still the name on it. But since that's their area of expertise, they are providing assistance to the airport for managing that plan and doing the quarterly inspections. And during one of the inspections, it was noted that there are certain things that improvements that need to be made to that pond to make it best practices and required to have a good water quality pond. And that's going to be about $26,000 worth of improvements. And we have some other areas on the airport that have some asphalt that need patch repairs done. And so I budgeted around $15,000 to $20,000 for that. So that's why you see $100,000 planned for this year.
That's helpful. Thanks. I would have thought some of those projects would have been capital and in a capital budget. So I guess I'm just surprised to see them here, but it makes sense, from the other conversations we've had.
So unfortunately, on the capital side of that and getting grants, the FAA last year changed its rules in what is eligible for funding from them. And unless there is a sponsor-owned hangar or facility along that taxiway or taxi lane, then it is no longer eligible unless you have that. So that's some pavement maintenance that we just have to do ourselves.
Gotcha.
And I think Malcolm is muted.
Yeah.
Malcolm, can you unmute?
There you go. You hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, yeah, about a month ago, I did some digging, and I don't know if the FAA allows it or if there's an option, but some of the paving companies offer something called chrome rubber paving, and it's quite a bit less money to pave with than traditional asphalt paving. And I don't know if you thought about looking into that. I did send you an email with a link, and I'm not sure if you were able to look at that.
Okay, I'll have to look for that email, and if not, I'll reach out to you and get you to resend it.
Okay. It's definitely worth a look. It incorporates used tires, and it's formulated for the area, and it's considerably less expensive to pave with than traditional asphalt.
Right, and of course, we'll have to meet certain weight requirements and things like that. But for this particular project, the city has already an on-call contractor that has contract rates.
Okay.
In which he gives us pretty good rates, and so. Because typically, if I were to go outside the on-call contractor for that price range, I would have to obtain quotes or put out an RFP for another contractor.
Well, maybe they could ask that contractor if that's an option if they do chrome rubber paving. I just thought it might be a good idea to see if that's something they offer, because it traditionally is less expensive per mile to pave that way.
Okay, well, I'll check with him on it.
Okay, I just thought I'd throw that out there. So.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Other comments or questions from any board members or Councilmember Peck on the financial update? Or I guess on this section of the financial update. Mr. Robeson.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. I remember, David, when this came up last year that the FAA changed their rules on what they were going to foot the bill for as far as pavement on the airport. I joked that the city should buy all the hangars, but you've looked into the details of the rule. If the city owns one little building at the end of the stretch of pavement, will the FAA pay for the whole way to get there? Is there a way that we can still get some FAA dollars for this?
I haven't heard of an interpretation from the FAA that would preclude that. So I would say, with a knee-jerk response and not having researched it more, I would say yes, that it would be eligible as long as the city facility is on that taxiway, then it would be eligible.
I don't know. What does the board think? Should the city construct a small hut at the end of each hangar alley?
I think if it's within the rules, I don't see a problem with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's something we can look into.
Or it could be something useful. I don't. It just seems a shame that all of a sudden the airport has to foot a bill that it hasn't funded itself for many years now.
There are a lot of airports that feel that way and have expressed their opinions to the FAA on that as well.
I like the creativity, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I would be curious as you look at a master plan and have the CIP discussion. If there are functional, useful, needed developments that then can occur that maximize eligibility. I think that'd certainly be something to have as part of that conversation.
And I definitely think that's something in the new business the next item in the old business on the CIP discussions, if there are any, we can definitely take that up unless we're there already.
Well, are there any other comments or questions from the board on the financial update before we go there? Also, let's move on then to the CIP update.
So board member Bliss and Robeson volunteered to sit down and talk about the CIP and if there were any potential projects that we could fund ourselves. And we had planned on deferring that until next month, but we were able to meet this week and have some discussions. And from that point, I would stop and maybe ask board member Robinson to make any comments that he might have with regards to that, or board member Bliss, either one.
No, I could just mention that we talked about the sewer line that you've slated to get done this year, starting in May.
That's correct.
And we talked about maybe starting it a little earlier, but May's probably the best month anyway because of the weather.
Well, and I did receive an email from some folks over in the finance department with regards to that. So what had happened was we received a grant from the state for $400,000 to go towards that project. Mm-hmm. And the airport fund was putting up about $322,000. And due to some unforeseen circumstances with the engineering, it was pushed back and deferred, and we were not able to get that under contract during the fiscal year 2020, which means that those funds can't exactly carry over. So now we have to get it reappropriated, even though we have the grant in place and we had city council approval on those appropriations. We have to go back and get it reappropriated in 2021, but they can't do that until they close the books on 2020, which is going to be around the May timeframe. So hopefully in May, early June, it will go before council and get reappropriated, and we can put the bid on the streets and have that project completed by the end of the fall.
Sounds good. And does that mean that the engineering is complete?
Yes. They were finalizing the drawings the very first part of February, first week of February. And then purchasing was working on the specifications book and would have had that completed by hopefully tomorrow. So those will be on the shelf ready to go as soon as we get the money appropriated.
Okay, thank you. And I guess Russell can talk about the increase in the rates for hangars.
And that is a separate agenda item as well.
Okay.
Yeah, the only thing that the thing that caused me to want to meet with David was thinking about the pavement and looking at the CIP plan and how it has changed since 2 years ago, mainly due to COVID causing state and federal funding to be delayed, expected to be delayed. So, but I was driving around the airport and I realized that most of the pavement that needs it the most, besides the taxi lane that's already slated for this year, is pavement that is the hangar owner's responsibility. So we got into a discussion of exactly which pavement is hangar owner's responsibility and which pavement is airport responsibility. And going back, this kind of ties all into all the things that I've talked about the most. Going back to the snowplow issue, we got the map from David. It's got the red zones, got the green zones for airport and hangar owner responsibility. To me, with a blank slate, it would make sense to have one person do all the plowing. Now, I understand that may not be feasible in our case because of the equipment the airport has, and also private companies have a bone in the fight. They're getting paid to do this third-party snow plowing. They like that, and don't want it to go away. The same kind of map exists for pavement ownership, though, or lessorship, I guess you would say. And there's none of those same reasons are a benefit in the case of pavement. You know what I mean? Nobody's making money extra money as a third party plowing the pavement in the summer. It's just, in my mind, it's a function of the city is able to include this 25 feet in front of a hangar generally as part of the lease responsibility to kind of foist that cost off on the hangar owner is the end result of it. But when I was talking to David, we were talking about economies of scale being helpful at the airport. If all of the pavement in an alleyway or a taxiway were done at the same time, it would be more cost effective overall. So I would like the board to consider recommending to city council that going forward, the lease does not include any pavement. The city airport will take care of all pavement maintenance. And in return, we would increase the lease rate to reflect that cost. And that way, all the maintenance would be done by one entity, and the city's not going to be losing out on the money that they suddenly have to add into the budget. But that's my idea, and I guess something I'd like to discuss going forward.
So, and 2 points on that before anybody else jumps in, if I can. So I've worked with Longmont Owners and Pilots Association with regards to the snow plan, and we've got I believe, a good plan going forward, at least to begin with the potential for future changes to include more than just the area that we're expanding. So there are some areas on the north side of the runway, on the west end, those taxi lanes that Russell's talking about, that it's easy enough to have the snowplow scoot over and make a pass or a pass and a half on each side, so that it's workable and it keeps the airport flowing smoothly. However, as that kicks off and progresses, then there may be other people more interested in that also have their own responsibility, interested in joining that. So there could be future changes to that, but going forward, I think that it's a good trial run, and I think that we've worked well together between LOPA and the airport manager's office, and I will be getting that map out very soon. I got final comments and okay from their perspective, and they seem to be speaking for a few other people on the airport as well. The other thing that I would mention with regards to the lease area, if it's acceptable and if city management supports it and takes it to council, and council even supports it, of taking over pavement maintenance of those lease areas based off of the revenue generated by the lease, that's fine. But those areas that are already damaged, the city will not accept taking over pavement maintenance of those areas until they've been fixed to the city standard, which is basically close to FAA standards, if not FAA standards. We can't accept damaged pavement to maintain and just start off with broken pavement, fixing people's pavement that they've been responsible for maintaining all this time. So if that makes sense. But
yeah, thank you, Dave. That makes sense. I do want to open it for comments. Maybe can we start with pavement and keep comments on pavement, and then if there are comments on snow, we can do those second. Any board members want to speak on the pavement topic? Mr. Bliss.
Yes, David, any estimate on how much it would cost the hangar owners to take over and pay for the city to do the snow removal?
depending upon the area, because you have some areas it's just a straight push, and you have other areas that the equipment has to go in and turn in kind of a tight area, and it's going to take more time in some areas than others. There's just so many variables. I couldn't come up, especially just off the top of my head, with any kind of a real estimate that would be
Okay,
feasible.
well, then the other question is, are you saying that it wouldn't be an equally shared expense?
No, I'm not saying that either. I just think that I could look at one area and say that to completely take care of that area, it may only take 1 or 2 passes. And then in other areas, it may take 3 or 4 passes with turns involved, and that would take longer than the other area that just has 1 or 2 passes, straight passes. So I'm just saying that the areas out there that are currently tenant responsibility, there's just too many variables to come up with a good estimate.
Okay.
And I wouldn't look at it as my estimate being each individual place and being different. I would just say the total cost to the airport fund would be based off of all the areas put together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, but isn't there a way to just kind of figure it out and see how much it costs every year to remove snow and then?
I think there's definitely a way to do it, but being given the question now, I'm just saying that I don't know that I can come up with an estimate in this meeting for you.
I mean, would it be like $1 more? I mean, I don't know what the cost of snow removal is.
I would expect based off of not knowing the area that's damaged, the type of material that's damaged, how thick it is. I mean, you would basically have to go out and do an analysis of what's damaged out there for me to be able to come up with a number for you. And I just can't do that in this meeting right now.
Oh, I understand that. I just thought maybe off the top of the head you would know, but obviously if we're going to go in that direction, that's what we'll have to do. Calculate how much it costs every year and then see how we amortize it out to each hangar owner.
Correct.
And there'll be a little bit of pushback from some of those guys. Some maybe not, because the private ones, at least on the south side, they're not happy with those guys that they've hired. They've dug up the taxiways in several instances that I've heard of. So you might be able to sell it if we get the city to do it, and it's done with good equipment, and they really can keep those taxi lanes open.
Are we talking about pavement maintenance or snow plowing?
Snow.
Oh, okay.
Snowing.
Yeah, and
obviously we have to get the pavement repaired before we launch into the cost of snow removal and all of that.
Okay, I apologize. I thought we were talking about pavement maintenance. I'm sorry.
Well, we may have been talking about both of those.
Okay. Well, and I think both of them, we kind of have to sit down and do an analysis and, get input from the contractor on snow removal.
Okay, well, thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else have questions or comments?
It just sounds like a unified approach is what we're ultimately looking for. Unified approach to the pavement, to the plowing. Then if the plows wreck the pavement, it's on their liability, and to just get a unified look at the surfaces that we all share as opposed to individual ownership of portions of the surfaces. It'd be worth our time and whatever we can do to help you to analyze that and come up with the numbers and find out if there would be a ton of pushback and if it's something we could advance for the overall maintenance and improvement of maintenance at the airport.
Question I have, Mr. Slater, is so pavement right now, as Mr. Robeson noted, the poor repair is not the city's responsibility. The areas that need to be repaired. What mechanisms does the city, that may not be 100%, but at least in some areas, what mechanisms does the city have under the current leases to encourage, mandate, whatever word you want to use there, the private owners to maintain the pavement as they're required to in their lease?
Well, I think the lease would be the first place to start and say that you're supposed to maintain your area in serviceable and repaired status. And then this starts, I want to be cautious because it starts getting more into legal issues as to how you enforce that. But one option that I've seen done at many other airports is that if they do not do it, then the city does it and bills the leaseholder for it. But then again, you start getting into legal discussions and issues. So I'm cautious to say that that's an approach that we're going to take at this point in time until legal's had a chance to weigh in on it.
I just feel like there's a number of issues that we're all kind of cramming together. And one is, we started with pavement and poor repair. And, the initial question for me is just, all right, let's try to get that repaired, whatever that looks like, whether that's the city doing it in billing, whether that's the owners doing it, we can discuss the mechanism.
Right. And there are owners out there that's willing to address their pavement needs and requirements. There have been people, since I contacted the contractor and let everybody know that we're going to be doing the mill and overlay in that area, there have been people on the airport reach out and ask me for the contact information for the contractor to see if they could do work on their lease at the same time. So I know there's people out there interested in doing what's right. It's just the few that don't. In addition to the ones that just, well, if it's on my lease and not impacting anybody else, then that's on me. And, I can't speak for them, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't create FOD issues as well.
Mr. Robeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on that last point, that's kind of what got me to thinking that the unified approach would make sense in my mind is even if your lease area is 25 feet out from your hangar, it does affect other people. When I pull my airplane out, it's 40 feet wide. It's not staying only on the little piece of pavement that I'm supposed to maintain. The guy right across from me has just as much effect on the FOD and under my ramp as I do. So I think it does affect more than just that tenant.
I agree. I mentioned that from the standpoint of that's in the past, some of the responses I've heard.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I can imagine.
Well, I have to imagine, again, we don't have the numbers. I'm not asking you to do the numbers right now, but that this would be a fairly significant change to the airport's budget if you were kind of doing this as a new policy going forward. And, I think it's a worthwhile discussion to have, particularly if we have any, rough numbers in the future. But,
I agree with that whole premise that it completely changes how the airport looks at its budget and where the funds are going to be spent. And I think those are places they need to be spent, but at the same time, keep in mind that we need to generate more revenue in order to increase the budget to address those needs, because you're also increasing the workload. And Councilmember Peck has been kind enough to advocate for an operations person to help me out here. And so then you're also looking at, okay, well, if we're going to do that, we also need to look at salary and benefits for an operation department or person that would assist with those things. So, you're not just increasing the budget from replacing the pavement, but you're also going to at some point have to look at increasing the budget to get somebody out here to help me.
I think that all ties into our next agenda item.
It does.
I think you're right. It does. I think, at the appropriate point, this is a really good discussion to continue. I would like it, if we're going to come back to this, have it as a standalone agenda item and make sure it's on the agenda to, encourage some public comment on this as well. particularly since these virtual meetings are a little bit more complicated and we haven't gotten the comments live. That one is so impactful. I want to make sure we give folks an opportunity to comment on it at the time we're discussing, not just when we're making a decision on it. So with that kind of transition teed up, were there any other comments on airport needs at this point? Well, and let's move on then to the review of rates and charges. Mr. Slater again.
The only thing that I show redlined on there is, and I think everybody's had a chance to read it, is previously we had on there the standard lease rate for land to construct improvements upon for aeronautical and of course non-aeronautical, which the market rate currently is 0.3576 cents per square foot per year. The recommended changes that I put on there, and I think this is also something that other city staff will want to provide some input from the city manager's office in different areas. So I suggest we also bring this back next month before we make a vote on it. This is more of just to kick it off and get some discussion going and ideas and thoughts on it. That rate was intended for whatever the lease rate is, but there was an oversight when we passed that via resolution through council. And the oversight was, well, if someone who's had a lease for 2 years that started off at that rate and has had 2 years worth of CPI escalation, if they sell their hangar, we terminate that lease and start a new lease with the new owner of the hangar. Well, it starts back over at that lower rate of 0.3576. So the suggested edits that I've made would rectify that by saying for existing leases or development already on that, it is either that rate or what the current lease rate is, whichever is more. So that way you don't lose on a new lease, you don't lose those 2 years of CPI escalation, if that makes sense. And I did the same thing for non-aeronautical. The reason that lease rate has been the same since we adopted it is to encourage development at the airport. If you go up every single year based off of escalation, then within 2 or 3 years, it's going to be at a rate that's higher than other airports that provide more services than we do. And we want to kind of keep it in a median there, a median range between the low end and the high end. Because on the lower end, you've got demand right now for the current rate. So you don't want to be on the lower end, but you don't want to be on the higher end either, because you don't provide the same amount of services the airport on the higher end, or that they're charging. We're not providing the same amount of services that those airports are providing. And so historically, that's been the kind of how we looked at why we're at the rate that we're at. And we want to continue to incentivize development, which incentivizing development would generate more revenue. But as our discussions have taken place tonight, that could be something that changes depending on the city's viewpoint and approach to what we've discussed tonight with regards to pavement maintenance or snow removal services, whatnot.
Also, given that this is, open for discussion at this point and not a formal vote, it looked like Vice Chair Jordan, did you have a comment, question to kick us off?
Yeah, just a question about the non-aeronautical. So the second red line, that rate is the same as the aeronautical rate, and that should be higher.
Yes, that's a typo. It should be the $1.11.
$1.11. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I'll make that adjustment.
Okay.
And that's why I don't want to vote on it tonight.
Mr. Robeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David, when was this 3576 rate implemented exactly?
I believe it was around 2016. And previously, that was actually in code. And to make it easier to make those adjustments, we changed the code to refer to the schedule of rates and charges. And that way, the city council could adopt the new rates and charges by resolution. But we agreed that it would go through the airport advisory board first so that people would have the opportunity to make comments on it.
Okay. So I'll probably recuse myself from any voting since I'm a hangar owner and thus have a vested interest in having the lowest rate possible. But I figured I'd give you guys what I have. Our Hangar Owners Association signed the lease in 2015. The rate was 0.2719 per square foot. So I guess it was the very next year that they increased it to 3576. Is that your recollection, David?
That sounds about right. I would have to do some research to tell you for sure with 100% accuracy, but that sounds about right.
So all I can say for sure is in February of 2015, it was apparently 0.2719. So I did the CPI calculation. I'm not the Hangar Owner Association president or anything, so I don't have access to our actual number, but just based on the CPI, I think our HOA is probably paying around 0.3247 right now. So that's about 10% less than this 3576 rate that they implemented in 2016. So that's just food for thought, I guess. Someone who signed a lease the next year after we did is still paying 10% more than we are, having signed it in 2015 with the CPI increases.
Other questions or comments from board members? Mr. Robeson, I find that really interesting, particularly since I'm looking at this as no changes across the board, and kind of the historical context is, I think, valuable since we just had a conversation about a long-term need to increase revenue, and yet we're not changing any rates. So it's helpful to understand the kind of 4 or 5 years back what we were doing.
Well, I thought about that too, and I think David kind of hinted at you want to do a stair step because you don't want to increase the rate every year. So when you first step it up, it's going to be above the trend line basically, but then it comes back to the trend line if you keep it flat for some number of years. So just based on the CPI, our HOA will be paying this rate in 3 or 4 years if we don't change it for that long.
Does that same logic then apply to these other rates that kind of every rate on here has the same general approach, Mr. Slater? Does that sound fair, at least without the exact math?
I would suspect that's accurate, yes.
So these have all been stair-stepped in the past, not necessarily just a CPI only.
Correct. Well, those that had leases in effect, and you can go back 18 years when it was 12 to 14 cents a square foot. And by the time they get to the end of their 20-year lease, they still won't be paying the 0.3576 that is the current market rate or the market rate that we've looked at. Now, keep in mind that there are different things that affect that. So if for some reason we put an RFP out and someone bids on it and is awarded to develop hangars and bring business to the airport and things like that, if it's a significant amount, then obviously the demand has gone up significantly. And that may have us look at it pretty quickly to see if it would be justified to raise it at that point. those are one of the things that you would consider when looking at the market value of the land is what is the demand. If you start getting a very high demand, then you can look at, okay, what could we raise it to and people still willing to pay and develop here. So that's one of the considerations as well.
So on that train, then we did have at least one RFP, and was it 2019? Is that right?
We had a couple of them in 2019. That's correct.
Again, kind of broad brush, but given the demand and given the response you got to those, was there significant bidding above this rate? Was the interest sufficient to kind of entertain that discussion, or was it?
So on one of the RFPs, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead and finish.
It's okay. Go ahead.
So on one of the RFPs, the person submitting there's no way of knowing how many people would submit, and they wanted to help ensure that they got the award. So they actually bid 36 cents a square foot instead of 0.3576. So on those leases, they're at 36 cents a square foot. And that person was willing to accept a lease for that. So, and that person has built 4 hangars on the airport. And then the other RFP that we put out that we had a response to was on the south side. It was at this rate, and that person was the only person who submitted. And so they built 4 hangars on the south side. So we have had 8 hangars being built on the airport since 2020 into 2019, beginning of 2020.
Both RFPs with single response. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Certainly, at least in my mind, doesn't support raising a rate at this point. I'm just, trying to understand that demand a little bit given the rate out there.
Right. Yeah, and the reason I want to bring it back next month and give more thought to it from the city staff position is we kind of wanted to get the board's input and take that input into consideration as we look at it.
So any other input then from other board members on this before we move on? Mr. Robeson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The last thing I just wanted to make sure we're all thinking about, we talked about a little bit yesterday at David's office, is now we're doing 30-year leases going forward. So that means whatever leases are signed are going to be chained to that CPI for the 50% longer than they have been. And they won't have the opportunity to realize any additional revenue, 15 years down the road if there's increased demand at that point.
Good point. Thank you. Well,
that's all I had on that item was just, other than our discussion tonight, the 2 items which I need to correct one of the figures on, but basically correcting that oversight so that we don't lose money.
David, do you want a motion from us or anything at this point, kind of giving you official input, or has this been, the discussion's been sufficient for what you need?
I think that for now the discussion's sufficient, and I think that we'll just bring this back to you for your recommendations to council on this next month.
Okay. Thank you.
I still have to wait and see when city management wants to, if and when they want to put this on the council agenda. But I think the way the statute and the bylaws and all that is set up, this is something that we need to review anyway. So I wanted to get it in front of you as soon as possible.
Thank you. I think it's helpful to have that discussion in advance. Well, so then we will move on then to agenda item 7, which is our final public invited to be heard. So for anyone watching the live stream, this is now the time to call in again. Information's on the screen. Phone number, again, 888-788-0099. Meeting ID is 824-3120-3618. And for the participant ID, press pound. If you're going to join, please do mute your live stream when you call in, and then we'll call on you by the last 3 digits of phone number. For board members, we're going to take about a 5-minute break here and give folks the opportunity to call in, and then we'll come on back and wrap up the meeting. We're going to give about 2 more minutes for folks to have the opportunity to dial in. Again, numbers on the screen, but dial in 888-788-0099. Meeting ID is 824-3120-3618, and press pound for your participant ID. We'll give it 2 minutes and then come back in.
Chair, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. We have about 30 seconds before it will clear the live stream, and then we'll be back ready to go. Currently, we do not have anyone in the call queue. And we're clear.
All right. So we will then move on to agenda item 8, which is board, council, and/or staff comments. So I'll start with board members. Any comments or questions from any board members on anything tonight? Vice Chair Jordan.
Just want to let you know, David, that I have gotten information together to give you for the annual report. And I was trying to convert that PDF and it was like 36 hours in, it hadn't done it. So I came up with a different way. I'm going to just send you some new text that you can copy and paste into your document.
Okay.
And that was mostly mercy missions with animals this last year. We didn't have near the number of, events and activities or things to support really. So once again, if anybody knows of anything, I think I've got a pretty good picture on Pilots and Paws and a lot of the annual animal rescue efforts and then staging for the fires. But if anybody knows of any charitable, Make-A-Wish, milestone events, anything like that that you participated in or know other pilots that might have, if you can get some information or direct them to me to get that information ready for David to put in the annual report. The other thing, I guess, and then I'll mute, Polly or Joan, I gave you a bum lead on the noise. When you asked about the noise group, I thought it was the local group and didn't realize it was the group in Jefferson County, and was going to correct that and then saw the discussion that came up with a noise complaint. So if there's anything we can do to help you clarify that kind of information that is in another county and much larger airport than ours. So it still isn't really apples to apples to what we deal with here. But just wanted to clarify that I thought you were talking about the local effort and that's actually that larger effort.
Yeah.
Sorry for that.
No, that's no problem, Melinda. I actually haven't gone. They've only had 2 meetings.
Yeah, it's
and
just
I
been a
haven't
few.
gone to them, but I have talked to Harold about it, and
Good.
He decided that it would be a good idea just to sit in to make sure, or just to be aware of what's going on with the other discussions.
Okay, good. Thank you. I think that's it.
Thank you, Vice Chair Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Bliss.
Yes, thank you. Just a question about the air show. We talked about that last meeting. Are we going to be discussing that in another committee within a committee at some point?
So Airport Manager Slater had asked that we push that off because of the rates discussion, and then so next month we would finalize the rates, as I understand it, and then go through the annual report, and then we'll have room in our time to move into the air show. But if you want to have any discussions with people, what we need is that leadership team. We cannot do it without a leadership team, and so. The person in charge, the president, the general contractor, the executive producer, is all that has always been volunteers. And a lot of those people have come from the board. So if you are having any discussions and can recruit and encourage anybody to help at any level, and then seeking sponsorship would be more into next year for that. It's really getting those people together so we can start having meetings and laying out the duties. It's about an 18-month undertaking, and it's a lot, but if we've got a good leadership team, then we can get it done without it being too painful. So any discussions people want to have, and then we'll put it on the agenda either for next month or the following month, I believe.
Thank you.
Any other comments from board members? Mr. Slater, are you able to give any update on the Part 16 complaint? I know the city put out a press release on that.
I'll try to answer any questions that you have. All I can tell you is that we received a decision from the FAA, and the FAA agreed with the airport, and that they found no ground assurance violations that were asserted in the claim. And we're ready to move forward.
Thank you. That's a good update. We appreciate hearing that.
Sure.
Councilmember Peck.
Thank you. So David, I am going to once again ask for an operations person in this year's budget. And I'm hoping that at some point I'll wear down Harold and Eugene and we'll get somebody hired for you. So, but since some of this that you discussed tonight is coming to council, if the board would bear with me for a minute, I would like a couple of clarifications and maybe a thought or two. On the pavement and snow removal, it has always been my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, David, city owns the land. The FAA controls the airspace as well as the regulations for aeronautical operation. For example, the taxi lanes, the landing zone. As you can tell, I'm very up to date on the airport terminology. But so keeping that in mind, I would also like to know what is the amount of hangars that are under an HOA?
Well, there are various HOAs. Can I have an IOU and email you that information early next week?
Sure, but the reason I brought it up is that if we are looking whether it's private or city maintenance and snow removal, would there be any problem with doing an algorithm for cost and square footage for the cost and then just giving that bill to the HOA and let them figure out what each hangar owner owns instead of you being responsible of contacting each hangar and working that out individually? It sounds like a lot of work. And
for the pavement maintenance, I would agree. On the snow removal, it's more of looking at what it's going to cost the airport fund to get the contractor to do the work for those areas. So
yeah, once you get that contract, then you can break it down by area and give that bill to the HOA rather than.
No, ma'am. So of the snowplow that the city is responsible for,
right,
we do not charge any of the tenants for what we're responsible for.
Of course, that part I understand.
Right. So I think the thought tonight, and for clarification, and any of you can correct me if I misunderstood, but I think tonight the thought process was, since the airport is charging a lease for that area, then that should be included in the services that the airport provides. Different airports do it different ways. I've seen some airports that either don't lease as much area as we do, or lease as much or more than we do, but provide that service to them because they're paying lease on that area.
Okay.
I've also seen it the way we do it, which has historically been, we lease that area because I'm trying to think the best way to say it. I guess for the most part, we lease that area because the hangar tenant exclusively uses that area. If they pull their plane out in front of their hangar, they need enough room to pull their aircraft out for fueling or pre-flight checks or things like that. And they would exclusively use that ramp area in front of their hangar. And that's why we charge that. And I believe that historically has been the school of thought from the city's and airport's perspective, and why they lease that area is because it was being exclusively used by that tenant, which is also why if we offered those services to one, we should probably offer it to everyone and see what kind of response we get. But it's more of the philosophy of, well, is your philosophy that you should maintain that area because you use it exclusively and it's part of your lease, or you lease that area, we're able to take care of the snow and maintenance, and the amount of money you pay for that lease area would cover that cost. That, I think that's the school of thought of what we discussed tonight is the airport's receiving money for that area. Why not have the airport maintain it? And y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, if I misunderstood anything.
Okay, thanks for the clarification, and it'll be interesting to see what you come up with. But going on to the rates and charges, was a little confused in the discussion. Is the rate, when the rates go up, are the older leases their rate grandfathered in, or does everybody's lease rate go up, regardless if it's a new hangar owner or if they've been there 15 years?
So if there's a lease that gets a new lease that gets 30 years, it would be at whatever the rate is. Or the current lease rate, whichever is more. The older leases that are out there are locked in at the rate that they signed the contract at, plus any CPI escalation. So I guess to answer your question, those older leases would be grandfathered in under the older lease rates that they signed the contract at, plus whatever CPI escalation that has taken place.
Until their lease expires.
Correct.
Okay.
And when their lease expires, or if they change ownership and we have a new lease, then the new rate would take place.
Okay, thank you. And for the part 16, did I understand correctly that the drop zone rates that we charge, that the city council agreed that you should charge, they are under FAA guidelines and we are good with those rates?
We are in compliance, and the FAA felt that that was fair and reasonable, and they agreed that those are fair and reasonable rates and we can charge those rates.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank
you, one quick question, David.
Yes, sir.
Do all of the older leases have CPI in them, or are there any older leases without that provision?
Every lease that I've seen, which is pretty much every one of them, have the CPI increase in them.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Slater, do you have any comments then for us to wrap up this section?
Just one, unless there is some pressing item that I need to try to seek out someone else to work the meeting in June due to city staff schedule. I would like to cancel the meeting for June due to city staff scheduling. Unless something really super important comes up, and if it's that important, we can probably always have a special meeting.
Could we
kind of pre-cancel within special meeting if it's absolutely needed, correct?
Correct. We cancel the June meeting unless it's absolutely needed, and then my thought process, if it's absolutely needed, then one of two things. I can either try to find someone to run the meeting, or I can call a special meeting on a different date that doesn't conflict with the scheduling.
Could we use? Oh, sorry. Yeah, could we use that time for an airport air show planning meeting? Possibly.
As far as I know.
Okay. Okay. So if we just keep the discussion strictly to the air show, signing duties, logistics, things like that, going through what's happened, if we just keep it to that, if we could use that time, that'd be great.
That's my understanding. I will double check to make sure there aren't any legal issues.
Okay.
But that's my understanding of it.
Okay.
Mr. Bliss.
I was just curious, can we get Zoom if we're out of the country?
Can we get Zoom for what?
Can I participate in a Zoom meeting if I'm out of the country?
So Zoom is international, so you could use it in any.
So.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, I get another shot. I get my next shot next week, and who knows? I might be out of the country.
Where would you go?
Well, I'd like to go to Europe, but I don't know who's open now.
Mm.
They'll be opening back up, and Zoom is in Europe. The company that I worked with, we're in all through Asia and Europe, actually every continent, and we use Zoom exclusively. So you'll be able to do that from a beer garden.
Can you get into the country?
Yes.
That's the
question.
Okay.
Nice.
We can't answer for you, Steve.
Darn it.
Any other comments, questions from board members at this point? I'm sorry, David, actually go back to June. Do you need a motion?
That's
for the meeting?
the June meeting was all I had a comment on.
Do you need a motion from us to cancel it, or can you just do that?
No, I'll just do it. I just kind of wanted more make an announcement and see if you guys had any feedback or questions about it.
Okay. I hear no other
you all
questions beyond what we've said, so. Well, hearing nothing else then, I will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. So that'll conclude our February 11th board meeting. Very nice to see everybody for the month and look forward to seeing you in March.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good
See
night.
you guys.
Good night.